Hello, Infinite Masters. Welcome to the Infinite Mastery Podcast, where every single week we bring you high-performing world-class leaders to help you master your self-esteem and master your life. This week we have my personal friend, Julian Thomas, who is a transformational fitness coach on. He has helped elevate the minds and bodies of dozens of entrepreneurs and executives during his 10 years in the fitness industry. He has studied under world-renowned teachers in the areas of fat loss, intermittent fasting, mobility, and strength and conditioning. On top of that, Julian believes that the fitness journey can come from a place of self-love and non-ego, and can be seen as a catalyst for transformation in other key areas of life besides physical, such as mental, emotional, and spiritual. During this podcast with Julian, we have a really great conversation. He talks about the challenges growing up and how a certain moment in his life completely damaged his self-esteem and how he had to rebuild that back up through a lot of different challenges. And ultimately, he talks about how fitness is really a journey of personal improvement and loving ourselves versus just having a nice body. So I hope you just enjoy this podcast episode with Julian and myself. And without further ado, here we go. Tell me a little bit more about what was your childhood like? And I want to know, where were you born? Where were you raised? What was your environment like?
Okay, right on. Yeah, I grew up only child, essentially, with my mom. My grandma raised me most of the time because my mom was always working. I'm born to mixed family background. So my mom is Dutch Indonesian on one side, and she grew up in Brazil, moved to Toronto when she was about 30. And then my dad is from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and he's also mixed with native indigenous from the northern part of Argentina. And I grew up in Toronto, downtown Toronto, Canada.
Right on. Share us a little bit more about, what was your childhood like in the early ages, and tell us a little bit about in what moment did you have the most challenge in your life growing up?
It's a great question. So I grew up very much centered around sports. I was born with this gift of athletics, and I played soccer at a high level from my age, from like 5 to 8. Then I got into baseball, became an all-star baseball player. We actually represented Team Canada at the Little League World Series in the year 2000. If you look it up, you'll see me. I hit a home run against Japan that put me on, somehow they put me on the cover of the Toronto Star sports page, National Post, Globe and Mail, all these big newspapers. So I had this huge drive and purpose to be a professional baseball player, especially being on ESPN at 12 years old and in the newspapers. So when the next year we moved up a level and I'm just playing a regular game and I go for a headfirst dive, and what happens is as I land, I feel this, or I hear this tearing sound, and then I stand up and I look down and my arm is just like dangling there, like it's not belonging to my body. And then I realized, oh no, that's my throwing arm. That's not good. I can't really feel it. Then the pain comes in, and what happened was I severely dislocated my shoulder, tore all the ligaments and tendons. Years later, I had to get reconstructive arthroscopic surgery. But in the meantime, it completely shattered my entire world. It took away my community, my friends, everything I thought I was, my identity, and it led me to a severe depression that lasted for years.
Where did that depression come from?
It came from really a lack of connection, a lack of love, needing acceptance, needing community, needing support, not getting it from anybody, even family. And it was really underneath it was just an extreme sense of loneliness that just hung over me like a death cloud. And it took me a long time to get out of that, especially dealing, then I developed acne, and I, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So it was all around just a really bad situation back then.
So I'm just curious. So before your accident, what was your, I guess, emotional state, your belief about yourself? Did you seem to have high self-esteem, low self-esteem? What would you say you were at?
I had excellent self-esteem. I mean, at 12 years old, you're getting all this attention. People are throwing so much praise at you because you're good at something, right? And I'm surrounded by friends all the time. We're practicing 3-4 times a week. I feel really purpose. I was a natural leader growing up as a kid. Had a lot of friends in school, and once I had that injury, everything shattered. Everything went away, and because it was a big turning point in my life. We changed leagues in baseball, we changed schools. Going up to high school, and everything was new and fresh, and wasn't a good time. Worst years.
Huh.
I shouldn't say worse. I should say the most character building years of my life.
Interesting. So after your accident, you were talking about how you went into this depression, and your life pretty much turned and kind of seemed to go downhill. Would you say that your self-esteem was low at that point, or how does that work?
It was non-existent, man. It was non-existent, and what you end up doing, what boys I think naturally do, especially boys that don't have a positive male role model in their life, is turn to other boys with similar tendencies. And so we tried to mask that and get some kind of sense of self-esteem, sense of self-worth and respect by being tough. So we get into a lot of fights. We do it, eventually that led to joining a gang. And it was really just a cover for the emptiness that we felt inside, really. And that need for acceptance, connection, and community that come from the worst place.
Man, I feel like there's so many different ways this conversation could go. What's on my mind right now is this idea of like when things are going well in our life, sometimes we could feel good. Like when you're kind of a superstar, like everyone knows you and you're doing really well. You said your self-esteem is really high, which is really interesting to me because when I think about self-esteem is something more internal. It's something more of it's like a foundation. It's a baseline. So Absolutely. When I hear your self-esteem was high when things were going well, would you say that's more of your self-esteem or your self-confidence that was high?
Well, definitely both. Yeah, I think they're quite intertwined. I don't think you can have much of one without the other. So that I was all the characteristics were there: being good at something and having a lot of support and a lot of respect and admiration, things like that made me feel like a person, made me feel complete. Because at the time, obviously, you don't know any better. You need that from other people and other things versus generating it from within.
Wow. So what would you say if someone is going through a lot of challenges with their lives right now, and kind of if we're to take your scenario where you injured yourself and you had this thing that essentially identified you as a person back then, how would you suggest someone who is going through a hard time right now, who has low self-esteem, pick themselves back up?
I think it really comes down to the type of work that they're doing on themselves. A lot of people suffer from this low self-esteem, low self-worth. Nothing really changed for me until I made a commitment and I made a decision to work on myself and change myself from the inside out. So I discovered things like The Secret. I discovered people like Napoleon Hill, and I really started to understand how much my thoughts create my reality, and how my external reality, is a reflection of what is going on internally. So once I learned that lesson, everything changed for me. And I just started going into a really deep dive of personal development, self-growth, and learning how to create my experience of life, or how my experience of life is created through what is going on inside. And so really being conscious of how I'm thinking and how I'm feeling at all times.
This has to be one of the most interesting interviews for myself.
Thank you.
My mind is going in a lot of different directions right now, and I'm going to jump a little bit back and forth, just kind of based off what feels right. And there's like a lot of things that I'm just curious about. So it sounds like you had a really big mind shift.
Oh yeah.
But before that big mind shift, I know you said you were involved with gangs and other things like that. Can you kind of fill us in a little bit more about how did you go from baseball all-star to a gang? And can you fill us in more details about what that entailed and where that led you in your life?
Yeah, so, we didn't grow up in a great neighborhood. It was a pretty bad neighborhood in Toronto, downtown. And that was always close by. So what happened was when my identity was shattered, when my world was taken away, my sense of community, my sense of friendships with people, as a baseball player, I turned to the people in the neighborhood because I didn't have anybody else. I didn't have any coaches. I didn't have any older guys to kind of be my role model, to follow their path. So you turn to the guys in the neighborhood, and they're, boys that basically grew up just like me, didn't have a positive male role model around. Maybe their mom wasn't there for them, neglecting them at times because she had to go to work, and they just get drawn to each other. So that led me down a really destructive path. A lot of fights, a lot of violence. It culminated in me leaving home at 16 and ended up in jail at 18.
What got you in jail?
It was a big fight. And it was a big brawl, and they ended up catching me. And jail is where I learned, like, okay, so here's my final warning. I get two options. One is continue living the way I'm living and end up here, or worse, like some people I knew at the time got. Or I can really say I'm done, completely leave the environment I was in, completely leave the social circle I was in, confront those feelings of being on your own again, and make a positive change in your life. And that's exactly what I did.
Can you walk us a little bit deeper through what you would consider your kind of your darkest moment of your life, whether it was that or something else, and help us kind of relive it? What did you feel? What did you hear? What did you sense around you?
That's a tough one to nail down because there's been many, many dark moments, especially in those years. Very, very much a lot of the trauma and the pain that I'm still dealing with today is rooted in those years. So, there's different moments of, when I was the victim of a gang beating, and I had my nose broken and my cheek fractured, black eyes, my tooth is gone, and you're just alone. You're just alone, and you're bleeding in the street. You've just had this traumatic experience, and that's a really tough one to come back from. That's a really tough one to come back from because you feel like you don't have anyone around for you. Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, it surprises a lot of people when I start getting into my past, and I used to be really ashamed and embarrassed of it. Yeah. Here's the interesting part is I always, for a long time, until this year actually, I would be so stuck on on receiving judgment from people. I never owned the transformation I've made. I think this is where a lot of people get stuck, and they're kind of shy to tell their story. So for me, I'm finally, I'm sharing in front of audiences and groups of people. And, I had an interview on TV where I shared a lot of it, and it's really like you've done so much work on yourself to transform it, to make yourself a good person, and to show up really powerfully. Of course, it's going to surprise people. Why that? If there was any trace of it left, what was the point? What did you really do? Did you really do the work at all? You see what I mean? So I've done so much inner work on myself and distanced myself so much from that. And I truly call it a past life. Yeah. Fully.
So you're not the first person who has mentioned that kind of you put the past in the past and you're like living a new life. And what's interesting is for myself is I feel like my past is mostly in the past, but there's like parts of it that I feel like I'm constantly being connected with it, being in the line of work that I do. And I think for me, it's important to talk about the past in order to understand how do people go from there and get to where they are today.
Well, absolutely. Because, as we were talking about earlier, all these events, these things that left these emotional charges in you will surface in certain situations today in different forms, because they form the patterning that drives the results behind what you're getting in your life. So if you don't dig super deep into what's actually been stored in your subconscious mind and learning how the subconscious mind controls our results, controls our experience of life essentially, and guides our behavior, you're always going to be stuck in a cycle. So when you notice these patterns in your life where you're getting the same result and it's not the one that you consciously want, then you have to look at, okay, what is underneath the hood that I can't see? So that's going to require seeking support, talking to different coaches, investing in yourself. And that's the work that we're doing. So I am confronted with my past a lot when I work with people like my life coach or my mentors. But it's all serving a purpose, and it's all to really understand ourselves and reach that level of infinite mastery, self-mastery.
Yeah. Thanks for the plug, man.
Yeah, man.
Well done. What would you say was the turning point for you from kind of transitioning from your past life into your newer life?
So going to jail was the biggest thing that ever happened, I think. Because I went to a place called the Don Jail. It's a very notorious place in Toronto. And that's where I really realized I got clear on a few things I've never been clear about. Like, number one is, okay, freedom. Freedom is the number one value in my life, period. And it's been that way ever since. So when I decided I was going to be a different person, a good person, stop the streak of self-destruction, stop the streak of surface or broken relationships, I ended up going back to high school. So this was my 9th high school, by the way, because I kept getting kicked out. Oh. And so I go back and I go to finish my high school diploma. And in the last credit, in Canada, we have a credit system. I'm not sure if it's the same. But in the last credit, we ended up doing this co-op, which is basically a placement into an actual job. And I just happened to land one in a gym as a cleaner. So that's where I learned what personal training was. I didn't know it was a thing. You know, I'm like, who are all these like happy people, super fit, super like friendly, and they're just, what are they doing? They're just like helping people work out and teaching them about their health, and they're getting paid for that. Hell yeah, I want to do that. You know, and it ties in with the athletic nature I have, and so that's what I did. I decided, okay, I'm gonna go to college for this. There's college programs for it, and I ended up making it happen to put myself through college, and I started working as a trainer in the meantime.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do today? What does that look like?
Well, the work I do today is very much tied into all the work I've been doing on myself, because as I started really working with my mind and my self-talk and getting into personal growth, I became one of the top trainers in the company I was working for. And long story short, I ended up eventually starting my own training business, which is where I am today. And my core fitness programs, the way it differentiates from other coaches I've noticed I work with, is that I'm very big on the mindset part of it. I call it mental elevation. So understanding that we can take these self-development principles, these spiritual principles, and apply them to our fitness journey. Things like visualization, things like auto-suggestion, affirmation, and understanding that a lot of the negative self-talk that comes up in the fitness journey, these limiting beliefs, are a chance to work on this for ourselves. Even though it's for our fitness journey, technically, it will apply to every area of our life, because it'll change our relationship with ourselves, and thus it'll change how we show up. It'll transform the way we show up in the world. It's a more powerful way. I'm
kind of curious. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around fitness and having a good body. What are your thoughts on people who are trying to build a body just to look good?
Well, that's where I was and why I got into fitness, because I was empty and I had ego. I needed to fill it up with an inflated sense of self-worth by having muscle. So I became a bodybuilder for a while, and that's a lot of personalities get drawn to that lifestyle for exactly that reason. And a lot of them stay like that, unfortunately, but that's another story. So what ended up happening was, as I start to work on myself internally, I started to really see fitness as this can come from a place of self-love. It does not have to come from a place of ego. So you can still want to look good, but the reframe and the shift in thinking that I encourage people to have is that we are on this mission to develop this ideal physique, or to maintain it, because this fits within, this is what the highest version of ourself looks like physically. Okay, the highest version of ourself looks like in lifestyle might be one way, in presence, in appearance, it might be one way, and in the body is a specific way to certain people. So if you change that from I need to have this muscular or fit body to feel complete, to feel happy, to feel whole, and shifting that into I am simply going through this process because it comes from a place of self-love, and that's the body that I end up having anyway.
Yeah.
Right? If I exercise the way I prefer to exercise with weights, if I eat healthy the way I eat healthy, that's the body that goes with that style of living.
Yeah.
And those behaviors are coming from a loving place.
Yeah.
Self-love. I eat healthy because it's showing my body temple respect. I work out physically because I'm loving on myself by rebalancing my hormones and working my muscles and feeling strong. So you develop this confidence, and it spills over into every area of your life.
Why would you say, for you personally, that you love yourself? Where does that come from?
It comes from, that's a great question, because we don't grow up being taught how to love ourselves. We don't grow up it's taboo to say that I'm awesome or to celebrate ourselves. So when you go on this personal growth path and you realize it's okay to celebrate yourself, to love yourself, you start to want to do that more often because it shifts your energy completely. Because if you're shifting the way you feel about yourself and you show up for yourself, you're going to be having a much different relationship with the world.
How would you say that one learns how to love themselves? Because I think that's a challenging thing a lot of people go through.
You know what? You can't just decide overnight you're going to love yourself. I mean, you can, but it's going to take experimenting. Really figure out what makes you feel loved, to identify, my top 5 ways that I feel loved on myself. I've done a lot of work around this. My core values, my requirements in life in different categories for yourself, in your relationship, in your friendships, in your professional life. And if you align yourself with your core values after you have identified them, you're going to be living a much more fulfilled life, right? So if you identify that, in friendship, let's say, I require, core value of mine is someone who's present, someone who it's a reciprocal relationship, and you realize you're not having that with a lot of your friends, it's okay to let them go because you're not getting that loving feeling. And that's a way of loving on yourself. Sometimes ending relationships or friendships are a way of showing yourself self-love, right?
Absolutely. How does someone even care about loving themselves? Like, again, like you mentioned, it's a very taboo topic. It's like, why should I love myself? Aren't I okay the way I am right now? I think that's a lot of thoughts that people have.
I think it's really, if you just look at your results, so the results in your life, what you want them to be. Are the people you're around the people you actually want to be around?
Yeah.
Right? So that's where you identify where the work is. You see, as you look at the results you're getting, look at the life you're living. Yeah. And you can start to see, I can start to shift things. And when you start to shift things internally is when your external reality starts to shift. So it's really, it's important. I mean, it's not for everybody to do this kind of work. It's very confronting. This process of becoming enlightened, becoming highly conscious is very much look at the way you've been showing up for people, for yourself. Look at the results you've been getting, and okay, now we have to heal this, and now we have to do the work and start to get different results.
Yeah. I think a big struggle that a lot of people have, and when I say a lot of people, I include myself in this one, is there's this idea of, well, I know I should love myself more. I know that I should put in the work to improve myself, but it's just as easy to not do anything about it because I'm already comfortable doing that. Well, what are your thoughts around that?
Comfortable doing what?
Being not putting in the work, being mediocre, being okay with the life that the semi-miserable life that I might be living.
Well, neither one is right or wrong, right? It's if you are doing this work, you're on a different vibration than someone who is staying within their comfort zone and staying stuck in routine. So you're going to naturally attract yourself to the vibration of people that are similar to you. Yeah. The people you have around you are a direct reflection of who you are. Right. So if you start to change who you are, the people around you are going to start to change. So if people are okay with being mediocre, I mean, that's totally on them. Yeah. Totally cool. It's just someone that wouldn't come into the atmosphere or stay in the atmosphere of somebody who is really in tune with themselves. Absolutely.
Fascinating. As I'm asking about these questions, there's so much thinking going on in the process.
I'm glad.
What would you say is your biggest challenge is in regards to self-esteem and anything related with that?
At the moment?
Yeah.
Right now, it's healing my patterning in my relationship with money, like physical money. I've done a lot of work on myself this year. I've learned how to cry this year. I've learned how to tap into these repressed emotions and feel them out, rage them out, cry them out, whatever it is. But now I'm getting to money, which is a very, very interesting relationship, because we have the patterning from both our parents, right? And the patterning around a lot of subconscious feelings. So your patterning with money can come from many different things. If it's a negative relationship, or if it's kind of this stuck cycle, like mine has been, I've started to learn that it comes from these feelings of guilt, or these come from these very subconscious feelings of unworthiness. It is rooted in things from childhood. So the work is to really get back into those memories, and you can do different things around it. You can literally, through visualization, go back into those memories and heal or neutralize the situation you had when you find out what the memory is that instilled that feeling, that subconscious pattern.
Yeah.
Or take your physical adult self and go with your inner child to confront the certain people that maybe caused these situations that instilled those feelings. It's a very, very interesting world.
Awesome. What advice would you give for someone who is, I would say, younger, maybe in their teens or early 20s, or just someone who is challenged with loving themselves?
Find a teacher and a coach. So for me, I was having a lot of challenges around this, and eventually I discovered, or it was brought to me, the work by someone who became my spiritual teacher. And he's a man by the name of Stuart Wilde. And he was the first one to really, really install in me that the world is energy. So depending on your energy is what you're bringing into your life. See? So and then he became my teacher for years, and he still is today. So I read a lot of his books. I mean, he worked for me, right? I don't know anyone's individual situation, but it might be a different teacher, Napoleon Hill, things like that. Starting to read, starting to identify what makes you feel loved, starting to identify your core values in different areas of your life, and start aligning your life with them. And just know there's hope. It's gonna take a lot of work. It's gonna most likely require that you change the people you're around, you change the environment you're around. And it might be a feeling of loneliness at the beginning, but as you start to search for community, as you start to search for higher vibration people, you'll really start to change your life, and it'll be an ongoing process. Yeah, and that's what leads me here today, because it's been just this nonstop, just relentless pursuit of reaching getting towards my highest self, right? And just knocking off different areas of it.
Yeah.
To the point that now we're talking about it and we're telling the story, because back then, 10 years ago, when I was, sitting in a jail cell, no one could have told me I'd be speaking to a really good friend of mine that's from San Diego on an interview about self-esteem and transformation, right? But there's hope. There's hope if you're committed.
Yeah.
The path, you'll get the results. You keep putting in the work.
Absolutely. Thank you for that one. What would you say, how would someone find a coach, especially a spiritual coach? Where do you look for that?
You definitely, you set an intention. You just make a declaration internally that this is what you're calling in. You start looking, and things will pop out. Where he came to me was in a quite different fashion than I would have imagined. He came to me when I was searching for how mindset around money, and somehow I found his book. And then he started speaking to me in very spiritual terms. And then I started to get into his other books, Stuart Wilde, that started teaching me things like meditation, teaching me how to develop extrasensory perception and intuition, tapping into those gifts that don't come from our five senses.
Yeah.
Than that. Yeah. Wow. So looking around, asking people, getting a referral for sure is a good one. And as you start to commit to that path, the path will start to reveal itself. You don't have to know all 5, 10 steps ahead of you. Just one will lead to the next one. You show up for that, you learn the lesson, it leads to the next one. You show up for that, you learn the lesson, you keep growing and evolving and expanding.
Yeah. What recommendations would you have for people? Let's start with spiritual. What resources would you give? Podcasts, books, anything like that?
It depends where they're at on their journey.
How about just starting off?
For me, Napoleon Hill is great to onboard people into that way. He's a very spiritual person that did a masterful job in translating extremely esoteric spiritual concepts into language that professionals can understand. Right? So Napoleon Hill is a great one. Think and Grow Rich is fantastic. Stuart Wilde's book, some of his earlier books are incredible. Celestine Prophecy is another good one. So doing all these things in conjunction with journaling, setting time for yourself to meditate and to look within. A lot of people have trouble meditating because they think it's supposed to be a certain way. I like to, and I invite people to refer to meditation as sitting time, to just be with themselves, and they can either go within, they can observe their thoughts, mindfulness, they can project their consciousness into creating their reality in the spiritual plane to slowly move towards that in the physical plane. Yeah. A visualization. So there's many different things you can do with sitting time.
I like that, sitting time. I often see meditation as a very difficult, I'm not being present, I'm very distracted time.
It's extremely fun. It's become really, really productive for me.
Yeah.
Once I started to shift that way of thinking, it's Stewie, as I like to call him. And also, by the way, I should preface, I'm a big advocate for his work because he's passed away and he no longer can be an advocate for himself. And he's had a massive influence in my life. So I like to give credit to him where it's due and whenever it comes up. But anyway, so he taught me how our consciousness can go wherever we want it to go. So for me, I really love doing visualizations around your living situation, maybe my ideal romantic partner, maybe my friend circle, my community, my business situation. So you start to really tap into those feelings and these scenes in a different dimension, and you're starting to create it. Create it with all your senses. And you'll notice once you really start to get a hold of that and start to believe it's possible, things and opportunities will start to show up. It'll start to show up. It's a process. But if you can really believe it, like Napoleon Hill says, if you can believe it, you can get there. Yeah. It's not his exact quote, but if you really can create that reality for yourself in the spiritual plane and create that template mentally, you can live into it physically. There's a time lag. There's a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. What's for yourself personally, what would you say is something that you kind of visualized in your life and it's become your reality?
My living situation. Absolutely. I went from shitty apartment to shitty apartment, and now I live in a nice house. My friend circle, my community, right? I started really meditating on having really great people around me, and little by little, person by person, event by event, it started to build. And there was this one that Camp Reset that really made everything exponential. So I finally found community. I finally, live in a nice place. I have a great situation. Being an entrepreneur, that one took a while to manifest, but it happened, right? Having my own business around fitness. And then now I'm starting to get onto the speaking circuit and really, I saw myself as a speaker many times in my own meditations, and now it's happening. And I'm giving talks to crowds of people about my own personal transformation story, about, leading workshops, about shifting the perspective towards fitness as coming from a place of self-love versus a temporary path to fulfill emptiness. A lot of people think fitness is a temporary interruption to their daily life, when really it is a process of self-love, right? And it's just, that's why people say fitness is a lifestyle, because it's just like, this is just what we do.
Yeah.
You know, we just eat healthy because we eat healthy. It's not because we're trying to.
Yeah.
Right? It's a way that we show our self-love and respect. But anyway, I'm going on a tangent.
A very good one.
Thank you.
Yeah. Very, very relevant. All right. We're going to wrap this up. I want to know, where is the best people that people could find you or contact you if they want to get a hold of you?
I encourage people to just simply add me on Facebook, Julian Thomas, Fitness Transformation Coach, because I'm showing my journey on there. You know, I like to drop tidbits of inspiration where I can. I like to show my vulnerability where I can. And that's the place that I'm focusing on the most in terms of updates and what's coming up next for me.
Right on. Thank you, brother. And last thing I want to ask is, any parting words?
Yeah, just, you know, if you're struggling with self-esteem, if you're struggling with confidence, just know that it's a type of training. Just like any training you've done professionally, any training you've done in school, confidence and self-esteem is a type of training that you do with yourself. So the work you do behind the scenes alone is really what determines how you're going to show up in the world. Working on yourself, if you're doing if you decide to go on the spiritual path, if you're already on it, if you're doing this personal growth stuff, just stay on the path. Just stay on the path and develop that faith, develop that belief. Because if you start to do that for yourself, your whole world is going to change dramatically. Yeah, and I can promise you that.
Right on, brother. Thank you so much, man. It's so good to see you again, and
you too, man.
Thank you for being on and dropping your knowledge and sharing your story.
It's been an honor. Love you, brother. Thank you for having me on the show. Talk soon, man.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this week's episode of the Infinite Mastery Podcast. For more show notes and other information of this week's episode, as well as previous week's episode, check out infinitemastery.org. Also, we have a private Facebook group where we have regular conversations. You can hit me up there at facebook.com/groups/infinitemastery. Thank you so much, and see you next week.